If you're just joining us, welcome. But wait, this is part 2 of Chidinma's incredible journey. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, please pause right now and go watch it first. Trust me, you need to see how a humble housemaid became the owner of an entire luxury estate in Lagos. The transformation will blow your mind. And while you're here, please hit that subscribe button, smash the like icon, drop a comment telling us what you think will happen in this part, and share the story with someone who needs inspiration today. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Now, for those who've been with us from the beginning, welcome back. You remember where we left off. Chidinma had just revealed herself as the new owner of Golden Heights Estate, leaving Mrs. Nkechi and the other wives who mocked her completely speechless. 6 months had passed since Chidinma revealed herself as the estate owner. Life at Golden Heights had changed dramatically. Chidinma had kept her word. She didn't increase rent immediately. Instead, she invested in improvements: new streetlights, a children's playground, repaired roads, upgraded water systems. The tenants began to see her not as the vengeful village girl, but as someone who genuinely cared about their community. Mrs. Nkechi and Mrs. Blessings had become one of her most vocal supporters. After their tearful apology months earlier, they had transformed into a different person, humbler, kinder, always greeting the estate workers by name. They even started a small women's group where she taught other wives to treat domestic staff with dignity. Mrs. Adeyemi, however, was a different story. She had moved out immediately after learning the truth, too embarrassed to face Chidinma as her landlord. She left without saying goodbye, leaving her rent paid 3 months in advance. Everything seemed to be settling into a peaceful rhythm. But peace never lasts forever. One Tuesday morning, Chidinma received a phone call that made her blood run cold. "Miss Chidinma?" a deep male voice said. "This is Barrister Okonkwo from Okonkwo and Associates. I represent the Adeyemi family." Chidinma's heart skipped. The Adeyemi family, the children of the old man who had originally owned Golden Heights Estate. "Yes," she said carefully, sitting up straighter in her small office. "My clients are contesting the sale of Golden Heights Estate. They believe you acquired the property through fraudulent means and are demanding immediate reversal of the transaction." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" Chidinma whispered. "That's not true. I have all the documents. Everything was legal." "That may be. But my clients claim their father was not of sound mind when the sale was initiated. They also allege that you conspired with certain family members to rush the sale at an unfairly low price. We're filing a lawsuit. You'll be served papers within 48 hours. The line went dead. Chidinma sat frozen, her hands still pressed to her ear. Her hands began to tremble. Everything she had worked for, everything she had built, it was all being threatened. 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of discipline, 3 years of being mocked and enduring shame. And now, just when she was finally standing tall, someone wanted to pull the ground under her feet. The 3 years of sacrifice and 3 years of discipline and 3 years of being mocked and enduring shame. And now, just when she was finally standing tall, someone wanted to pull the ground under her feet. The lawsuit papers arrived exactly 48 hours later, delivered by a stern-faced courier. Chidinma read them alone in her office, her eyes scanning the legal language she barely understood. Adeyemi and Sons versus Chidinma Okafa. Claim: fraudulent acquisition of property, undue influence, conspiracy, breach of fiduciary duty, relief sought, complete reversal of sale, return of property to Adeyemi family, plus damages of 50 million naira. 50 million naira. Chidinma felt the walls closing in. She didn't have that kind of money. She had used almost everything she had raised, plus her investors' money, to purchase the estate. If she lost this case, she wouldn't just lose the property, she would lose everything and owe millions she could never repay. That night, Chidinma couldn't sleep. She lay on her bed in the small apartment she had moved into, modest despite now owning 12 buildings, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced through scenarios, each one darker than the last. What if they took the estate back? What if her investors sued her? What if she ended up in prison for fraud she didn't commit? What if everyone who now respected her turned against her? What if Mrs. Nkechi and the others laughed at her fall of grace? But then, something her father once told her echoed in her mind. Chidinma, the same God who brought you out of the village didn't bring you to Lagos to abandon you. Trust the process, even when the process is painful. She sat up slowly, turned on her lamp, and reached for her phone. The next morning, Chidinma did something she hadn't done in months. She called a meeting with her original investors, the two businessmen who believed in her vision when no one else did. Mr. Chukwuma and Chief Adeola arrived at her office looking concerned. They had already heard rumors about the lawsuit. "Chidinma," Mr. Chukwuma said gently, sitting across from her, "tell us everything." She explained the situation, holding nothing back. When she finished, both men sat in silence. Finally, Chief Adeola spoke. "Do you have all the original transaction documents?" "Yes, sir. Everything. Signed contracts, bank transfers, legal clearances. And the family members who approved the sale, can they testify?" Chidinma hesitated. I don't know. The lawyer I worked with, Mr. Emeka, he's disappeared. His phone is switched off, his office is locked." The two men exchanged glances. "This is serious," Mr. Chukwuma said gently. "Without Emeka, your case becomes much harder to prove." Chidinma felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not now, not when she needed to be strong. Chief Adeola leaned forward. "Listen to me carefully, Chidinma. I've been in business for 40 years. I've seen good people destroyed by legal battles they should have won, but I've also seen fighters who refuse to give up. Which one are you?" Chidinma looked up, meeting his eyes. "I'm a fighter, sir." "Good," he said, pulling out his phone, "because I know someone who can help. The best property lawyer in Lagos. She's expensive, but she's never lost a case like this." 3 days later, Chidinma sat in the pristine office of barrister Mrs. Funmilayo Coker, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, a no-nonsense expression, and a reputation that made opposing lawyers nervous. Mrs. Coker had spent 2 hours reviewing every document Chidinma brought. She examined contracts with a magnifying glass, made phone calls in languages Chidinma didn't understand, and took notes in rapid shorthand. Finally, she looked up. "Miss Okafa," she said, "your transaction was completely legal. The problem is that Mr. Emeka, your facilitator, has a complicated history." Chidinma's stomach dropped. "What kind of history?" "He's been involved in 3 previous property disputes, all settled out of court, all involving rushed sales and angry family members." She paused. "He's not a criminal, but he operates in gray areas. That makes you vulnerable." "So what do I do?" Mrs. Coker smiled, a small, strategic smile. "We go on the offensive. We don't just defend your purchase, we investigate the Adeyemi family because people who file fraudulent lawsuits usually have something to hide." Over the next 3 weeks, Mrs. Coker's team worked like detectives. They discovered that 2 of the Adeyemi children, the 2 leading the lawsuit, had already received substantial inheritances from their father before his death. They had been given properties in Abuja and Port Harcourt, but had sold them quickly and squandered the money on luxury lifestyles. When their father died and they learned that Golden Heights had been sold cheaply because they needed quick cash from the estate, they realized they had missed out on a valuable asset. The lawsuit wasn't about justice, it was about greed and regret. Mrs. Coker also tracked down Mr. Emeka. He had gone into hiding, afraid of being dragged into the legal battle, but when Mrs. Coker's investigators found him, she convinced him to cooperate. He provided sworn statements, original communications with the Adeyemi family, and proof that they had actively approved the sale price because they were desperate for immediate liquidity. Armed with this evidence, Mrs. Coker filed a countersuit: malicious prosecution and abuse of legal process. The court case began on a rainy Wednesday morning. The courtroom was packed. News had spread through Lagos that a former housemaid was fighting the wealthy Adeyemi family over a luxury estate worth hundreds of millions of naira.
Chidinma sat beside Mrs. Coker, wearing a simple but professional navy suit. Her hands were folded calmly in her lap, but inside, her heart was pounding like drums. Across the aisle sat the Adeyemi children, 3 men in their 40s and 50s, wearing expensive agbadas and radiating entitlement. The proceedings began. The Adeyemi family's lawyer, Barrister Okonkwo, presented their case with theatrical flair. He painted Chidinma as a conniving opportunist who had manipulated a grieving family during their time of loss. He suggested she had used feminine charm to seduce Mr. Emeka into facilitating an illegal deal, and even insinuated that she might have been involved in juju or witchcraft to cloud the family's judgment. Some people in the courtroom murmured. Others shook their heads. Chidinma felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. After everything she had endured, after all her hard work and sacrifice, she was being reduced to stereotypes and accusations. But Mrs. Coker remained calm. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly, adjusted her glasses, and addressed the court with quiet authority. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about property law. It's about something much older and more insidious. The assumption that a young woman from a humble background cannot achieve success through legitimate means." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The plaintiff's counsel would have you believe that my client used charm, manipulation, or even supernatural means to acquire this property. But the evidence," she held up a thick folder, "tells a completely different story." For the next 2 hours, Mrs. Coker systematically dismantled the Adeyemi family's case. She presented bank statements showing Chidinma's disciplined savings over 3 years, business records proving her legitimate income from provision sales and logistics, testimonies from her investors confirming their voluntary partnership, communications between Mr. Emeka and the Adeyemi family showing they had actively sought a quick sale, financial records proving the Adeyemi children had already squandered their earlier inheritances, and medical records confirming his father was of sound mind at the time of sale. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge, an elderly woman named Justice Adewale, removed her glasses and looked directly at the Adeyemi family. "Barrister Okonkwo," she said slowly, "does your client have any at all, beyond speculation and innuendo?" Barrister Okonkwo shuffled his papers. "Your Honor, we have testimonies from family friends who felt the sale was suspicious. Feelings are not evidence, Counselor." The judge turned to Chidinma. "Miss Okafor, please stand." Chidinma rose on trembling legs. Justice Adewale studied her for a long moment. "Young woman, how old are you?" 27, Your Honor. "And you purchased a property worth over 200 million naira through legal means at age 24? "Yes, Your Honor. Through savings, partnership investments, and a legitimate transaction. The judge nodded slowly. Remarkable. She looked back at the Adeyemi family. You should be ashamed. Instead of celebrating this young woman's achievement, you try to destroy it because you squandered your own opportunities. She banged her gavel. Case dismissed. And furthermore, I'm awarding Ms. Okafor costs and damages for malicious prosecution in the amount of 10 million naira. Maybe that will teach you not to waste this court's time with baseless accusations. The courtroom erupted. Chidinma stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Mrs. Coker placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You won, she said simply. Tears finally came, not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. 3 months of fear, sleepless nights, and constant worry melted away in that moment. Outside the courtroom, reporters surrounded her. Microphones were thrust in her face. Questions came from every direction. Ms. Okafor, how does it feel to win? What message do you have for young women? Will you forgive the Adeyemi family? Chidinma took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. I don't celebrate their loss, she said quietly. I celebrate truth. I celebrate hard work. And I celebrate the fact that in Nigeria, even a girl from a village in Enugu can build something real if she refuses to give up. The clip went viral within hours. That evening, Golden Heights Estate held an impromptu celebration. Tenants who had followed the case gathered in the compound with food, drinks, and music. Mrs. Nkechi was the first to embrace Chidinma, tears streaming down her face. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. You showed all of us what real strength looks like. Mrs. Blessing brought her own made jollof rice. I cooked this myself, she said, shying. No house help. I'm learning. Even some of the men who had previously ignored Chidinma came forward to shake her hand and congratulate her. But the most touching moment came when a young girl, about 14 years old, approached Chidinma nervously. She was the daughter of one of the estate security guards. Ma, the girl said softly, I want to be like you when I grow up. Chidinma knelt down to her level. What's your name? Blessing, Ma. Blessing, you don't have to wait until you grow up. Start now. Read books, save money, dream big, and never let anyone make you feel small because of where you come from. The girl nodded, eyes shining. Chidinma now owned 4 estates across Lagos and had expanded into Abuja. She had become one of the youngest female property developers in Nigeria. Forbes listed her among 30 under 30 African entrepreneurs to watch. But she still lived simply. Her apartment was comfortable but not ostentatious. She still ate local food, still wore modest clothes, still remembered where she came from. Golden Heights Estate had become a model community. Crime was almost zero. Children had access to after-school programs. Domestic workers were treated with dignity and paid fair wages. Mrs. Nkechi ran the community center full-time, now a completely transformed woman who spent her days empowering others. Mrs. Adeyemi had started a small catering business in Ibadan with Chidinma's seed money. They spoke on the phone monthly, their relationship healed by forgiveness. And the young girl named Blessing, the estate security guard's daughter, was now in university studying estate management on a full scholarship from Chidinma's foundation. One evening, Chidinma stood on the balcony of her Golden Heights Estate apartment, looking out at the compound she had once entered as a maid carrying a single nylon bag. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of her mentees. Miss Chidinma, I just signed my first business contract. Thank you for teaching me that my background doesn't determine my future. You changed my life. Chidinma smiled, tears forming in her eyes. She had learned something profound through her journey. True success isn't measured by what you acquire, but who you become and who you help rise along the way. The village girl they mocked had indeed bought the whole estate. But more importantly, she had bought freedom for herself and for countless others who dared to dream beyond their circumstances. And that was worth more than all the properties in Lagos combined.